turning insight to action, inspired by the Library Journal's recent summit on library safety and security. Now, those attending the summit, in particular, our host, PAVE CEO, Arlene Lemus, came away with a very determined focus on taking insights into action and contemplating the what if from what she intuited from other presenters at that particular summit, the buzz following the session. We've all felt that coming away from a particular conference and wondered, now what? What do we do with these great ideas and take them to that next step potentially for the benefit of our own library systems and also the wider library community? To that end, we've invited three industry leaders, Deb Sika, Colleen Morsley, and Joshua Fiesel, to join Arlene today in conversation. Before we introduce them, or they introduce themselves, here's our format for this afternoon. We'll provide a little context to that Library Journal Summit, as I know some of you may not have had the opportunity to attend. We'll provide opportunity for each individual panelist to provide some in-depth background on their role, responsibilities, scope of their positions, and then what informs them on the subject matter of safety and security in libraries. And we'll also move to three particular areas, about 10 minutes each. We'll invite each of the panelists to talk a little bit about their reflections on the summit and or, again, what informs their thinking on the key issues facing library security and safety. We'll then move to the next segment, which we talk about the reflections and implications of those key issues. And then we'll move to actionable strategies. What can we do to bring all of this to bear on improving systems, approaches, policies, all of these things that will strengthen the way in which we interact with our communities in libraries, first and foremost, creating safe spaces for everyone who is in our libraries, from patrons to third-party providers, and of course, most importantly, our staff members. And then how do we take this out in a collaborative way to de-silo some of this thinking so that everyone from Nipissing through to Chicago to Denver, all of us can be in a much stronger position to take some of these learnings to our own communities. And then we invite you, as our panelists are responding to each of these questions this afternoon, to drop your own questions in the chat. What is perplexing you? What would you like insight and feedback from all or a particular panelist? Please drop that into the chat, and then we'll provide some time for that. And we'll wrap up this afternoon with some summary insights and going forward some additional resources for everyone so we can keep the learning going and the community strong. How's that sound? Okay, great. So at this point, I'll ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Perhaps Arlene, you'd start us off, talk a little bit about your role and the scope of what you do, a little bit about PAVE, and what informs your thinking on the subject matter today.
Sure. Thank you, Heather. Welcome, everyone. I am Arlene Lemus. I'm leadership for PAVE Prevention, which stands for Proactive Anti-Violence Education. And we aim to create safer, healthier, more communicative workspaces. And we have found fabulous partners and collaborators within the library sector. We're very proud of the work we're doing there. What is informing me today, and I guess I'd also like to say what my takeaway was from the Safety Summit. It really was something we knew already at PAVE, and it's not only within the library sector, but it's across all sectors, is that there is this need to have conversations, as many as we can, around keeping ourselves safe, keeping our coworkers safe, keeping the people that come into our workspaces safe. In the case of libraries, members and community members that come into the library. But there's a need to have deeper conversations because there is a lot of siloed information, as you have already touched upon, Heather. So having conversations of what's working here, how can it be tweaked and work over there? How can we partner with something that seems like it wouldn't be a partner for us, a reporting software or, but how there is a connection and there is a way that we can pave can help keep our collaborations, the people we collaborate with safer with those connections. So yes, I'm happy to have these conversations. I'm excited about this panel. I'm excited about the number of people that we have interested in what this conversation is going to be about. And yeah, I'm ready to start exchanging information.
Thank you, Arlene, for starting us off. Josh, you be next, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Fiesel. I am president of Orange Boy. We provide software and some consulting work focused on helping libraries make the most of their data. And that includes, sort of for today's purposes, a product we call incident reporting, which helps libraries standardize their incident reporting process through standardized forms, reports, analysis, things like that. Personally, my background, I went to school for software, computer science, but then I took a left turn and went into law school. So my background is actually in law. So I come at this from an interesting angle with an eye towards some of the uh, risk management issues involved. But we always try to focus on what our clients need, and that really is, I think, my takeaway from the Safety Summit is every library needs something different. There's such a wide range of current approaches. It's the idea that there is a single set of best practices that everyone should follow is completely off base. Everyone has to adjust their processes to their environment, their geography, their customer base, their staff, their level of budget and support and everything. And so that I think was my biggest takeaway is that the amount of thinking needed to make sure we meet every library where they're at and help them find the best solution for them is absolutely crucial.
Thank you, Josh. I'm sure that that broad background that you offer, particularly in law risk management, gives your clients a real value add in their thinking and your associated solutions. Appreciate that. Deb, will you be next, please?
Sure. My name is Deb Sika. I am the county librarian for the Alameda County Library, which is in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. And so essentially, I am over all of the libraries. I have an incredible team that I work with. Our mission is to grow learners, break barriers, and build futures. And I think this work does all three of those things. And then our vision statement is a bit unique. It's simply kind, connected humans. And without safe libraries, kind, connected humans is not a possibility. So I think this work goes hand in hand. I come into this work after I've been teetering on 30 years, so almost 3 decades in public service, and seen libraries from red state to blue state, and seen behavior trends and differences, but also similarities in those types of libraries. Always have a background in archives as well. So it's my public service is informed by history and within that history with an equity lens. So a lot of the work that we do in Alameda County is centered on race equity. And so doing safety and security work with a consciousness around bias, was a really important thing for us to do. So basically, I've been on a 4-year journey with my friends over at PAVE, and it's just been incredible. It has made us go from, or at least me personally, in libraries feeling hopeless to hopeful. And so it's been quite an incredible journey, and I'm glad to be able to share it with anyone that will listen, actually. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Deb. It's easy to see how your approach that brings into this mission the importance of human systems with technology is so powerful in the work that you do. Thank you. And Colleen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me today, Arlene and the PAVE team. I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. My name is Colleen Morsley, and I am the Chief of Staff with the Urban Libraries Council. I've been with ULC for 15 years, starting as the Director of Communications and moving into membership oversight, and now I'm in the role of Chief of Staff. So I still wear all those hats to a degree. But for those on the call that are not familiar with the Urban Libraries Council, we are an action and think tank based in Washington, D.C., and we have 195 library systems as our members. So what we do is keep our ear to the ground for public libraries by working with different partners and funders and federal agencies to ensure that public libraries are supported, that library CEOs and their staff have the resources, professional development, and research and data to do their work well, but also to build their community. So we have a lot of offerings, and within the Urban Libraries Council, we have 15 member communities, and a few of those member communities relate to the safety and security of public libraries, which the social workers as well as the safety leaders. And so I'm close to this topic only because this is what I hear from directors as being their number one concern when they are thinking about their team and their community. So I know it's close to everyone's heart. Also working with the social workers and safety and security teams, I understand that the pressure they're under, and like Josh had said, every library treats this differently. So I'm here today to learn more from all of you and take that back to ULC, but also share some of the perspectives that I've learned over the course of my years with ULC. So thank you, Arlene and PAVE.
Appreciate that, Colleen. We already are hearing a number of stakeholder perspectives that will inform this discussion. It's really, really powerful, and I appreciate already your contributions. Just to give a little bit more context, as if we didn't know already, but it's good to have clear data to inform our thinking and to bring to bear what needs to change in order to not just recover from violent events and unsafe spaces, but to prevent that or mitigate some of the effects. So you'll see here some library statistics, a couple from the Urban Library Trauma Study in 2022, first being over 68.5% of library workers have experienced some form of harassment, verbal abuse, or violent encounters with patrons. And by extent, the ancillary effect of emotional trauma and stress and anxiety. 52% of library workers reported facing verbal harassment, while 32% encountered physical altercations or threats. And then finally, 70% of library staff who experienced violence reported long-term emotional effects such as PTSD, anxiety, and burnout. So as if we already didn't know, this puts an exclamation point on the impact of violence all the way through the human chain, as it were, from patron through to frontline workers, those who have responsibility for oversight in our municipalities. It is a massive problem. We've done a lot of documentation, and especially in Josh's field. What is it that we can take away in particular from something like the Library Journal Conference, our reflections and thinking on it to start to mitigate some of these effects and turn the data and the stats in another direction so that we aren't having the same conversation next year? So I'll invite now our panelists to provide some deeper reflection on conversations that you had at the summit or you've had with colleagues, if you didn't, in fact, attend the summit, about these issues of safety and security. And what are the implications of, first of all, staying the course? If nothing changes, what will happen? And then as we cast our thinking out over this year and next, what would be the biggest thing in your mind to move for the better to turn some of these statistics around? Is it a process? Is it a leadership issue? What are your reflections on this and the implications of those reflections? Who would like to start us off?
I can start,
Arlene?
Heather. For me,
Thank you.
some of my reflections coming out of the Safety Summit, one, first and foremost, it really landed on me in an intense way how much concern and frustration that leadership in the room had around creating a safe workplace and a safe environment for members to come into their libraries. That was first and foremost. There was not a lack of concern. There was not a lack of commitment to that issue, to that problem. Um, and it was um, refreshing, I'll say, in a positive way, that people were having open discussions around this because so many times when there are discussions around violence or around aggressive behavior, it seems to be kind of like, no, 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 we really don't have that problem. That's not really a problem
Mhm.
type of conversation. So for me, it was refreshing to hear the candor in the room. In addition, it gave me many different perspectives that
Mhm.
I hadn't been thinking about. I have my own, I know what I know, and I'm comfortable with that. But the conversations around even things like how there's a shift in how they are outfitting furniture wise, how they're, changing that approach to decorating libraries, where there used to be really this feeling to create as many little
Mhm.
quiet nooks as you possibly can. Now there is a complete shift around openness and no blind spots and no quiet spots. And, all of those
Mhm.
things were just, from my viewpoint of safety, like, yes, they're having these conversations and they're changing these things. The use of little things like mirrors on computers, on your computer screen, putting a mirror so you could see what's behind you. I mean, the simplest little things that can have a huge impact around safety. So all of those things, again, really exciting that they're part of the conversation now. I know that it's not realistic that everybody left that conference and started making these changes, but it's on people's thought process. If a new
Mhm.
library is going to be built, they're going to start discussing it in a different way. So that was something that, from a safety standpoint, stood out for me. I
Mhm.
was very moved by Josh's presentation. He was on a panel, and there really was, for me, it was an aha on how we could help our clients and our collaborations. We could strengthen what we do with them by using incident reporting software in a different way. So not just hearing the reports and documenting them, and so many of these happen, so many of those things happen, but really starting to think about what time of day
Mhm.
is it happening? What part of the library is it happening? We know that staffing is an issue for every library. Every library needs more staff. We
Mhm.
understand that, but if there's a way that a staff member can move just to this part of the library from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, when that seems to be a hot spot, um, you know, then it's not a whole new hire. It's just kind of a moving and a shifting. So that
Sure.
was again also an aha moment for me where we could better support our collaborations with our partners.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I left there excited about what I didn't know, and the future of conversations like this.
Mhm. Appreciate that, Arlene, and certainly the audience members, this was a summit directed to directors and those with responsibilities and ownership around these issues. So what role do you think that played in the candor of the discussion, for example? And maybe Josh or Colleen can add to that as well in their comments.
Sure. I think, I mean, Arlene really said it, right? The the important thing that we're seeing is that people are no longer putting their heads in the sand, right?
Mhm.
People are not only recognizing this is a problem, but we're talking about it. We are reaching out. Folks are making connections with other libraries and seeing what they're doing, sharing best practices, moving forward. And I think the fact that we've had the attendance and the participation at these safety summits from the highest levels is huge.
Mhm.
In our experience, when efforts to change incident reporting or incident management systems fail, it tends to be because of a disconnect between administration and folks on the ground, at branches who are actually dealing in the moment with these incidents, and being able to recognize and talk about the fact that incidents affect everyone at the library, from the people who have to deal with it in the moment and may suffer trauma at the time and need to have that managed, and you know to the folks who are making sure that their staff are safe, making sure that their customers are safe, to the folks who have to deal with the PR aspects and the overall impression of the library, to make sure that this doesn't affect um, their funding down the road, doesn't present the library as an unsafe space for their customers, their cardholders down the line. Um, Recognizing that this is something that affects everyone, admittedly in different ways, but uh, being able to recognize that and work on, all right, now, given that this affects all of us, how do we make sure we meet our goals to make sure that this is a safe environment for our staff, for our customers? How do we make sure that we get the support we need from our governmental body, our board, our stakeholders, to add a security person at this time, or to renovate the library in this trouble spot, this hot spot, to avoid some problems that we've been seeing, in our data. All of that is absolutely key, and it needs to come from the top,
Mhm.
uh, to really infuse that into the culture.
Really important, Josh, especially when we think about the objective qualities of data reporting and incident reports. They're vital, and yet they may often be shrouded in secrecy because of the culture of an organization that doesn't foster sharing and transparency as a means to troubleshoot and problem solve as a collective. So it's a challenge sometimes to marry together how we can use systems and human beings in their best light to mitigate some of these issues. Thank you
And
for bringing that to attention.
balance, right?
Yeah, the
The balance
inevitable
between
balancing, right?
transparency and maintaining privacy and confidentiality of sensitive information is key and very important in these situations. So
Mhm.
that is a recurring recurring issue that we work to help our clients with. It's tricky.
Indeed, indeed. Colleen, um, what's your thinking around the incident reports? Because I'm sure they contribute a lot to the data you collect and you report on behalf of your constituents. It's a lot of library systems. So I'm sure you're on the receiving end of a lot of this
We
stat
are.
and data. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, we are. And, we have a wonderful membership who is willing to share only to ensure that the field gets safer and, we have better systems in place and whatnot. Based on the slides and the statistics that you shared earlier, Those are big numbers. And to have the role of being the lead of security on a library team is a very big role. And I think it's worth saying that this job just cannot fall on one person or one department. To Josh's point too, it has to start with the leadership, but the entire library system has to be involved in this conversation and really understanding what systems are in play, how you react, how you all collaborate together, why you're doing it, understanding that you're doing this for the safety of not only your team member, but also your community. Also, resurrecting that mission statement. That's not what the library is meant to be. It is always a safe place for everyone. So I think, what I took away from the LJ conversation was these are great, but I need them to be bigger. I need these conversations to go up several levels and then also come down several levels, so that everyone's talking in the same frame of mind. Often when I'm talking with some of my ULC peers in the social work, or even HR, it's not conveyed that they're having these bigger conversations or they're invited to the table with the director to talk about safety and security. So I think that's one area that, could be considered in change, having more system-wide conversations. Um, and I think also letting your community know that you are working really hard to build a safe library so that the community feels safe. Frankly, this is why I really like how PAVE operates, is because it is the whole system safety network learning together. And I think that's really wise, as opposed to just taking chunks of people from the system to get that heavy lift, and then they have to convey it to everyone else. That's impossible. That's totally impossible. So I like what Arlene has in play, where everyone, comes along at the same time and learns together. I think it's great. And I hope to see more of that in the field.
Yeah. Thank you, Colleen. Deb, I believe you were not at this particular conference, but you're a regular conference attender, including the MetLib conference back in Toronto in October. What informs your thinking around this, and in particular, as we look at broadening the responsibility and the burden of this system-wide?
Oh, thank you. And I was there in spirit. I did a little recording. So, but I think, well, let me ground this work in the fact that we tend to have a negative bias towards violence in the libraries, and I do always want to remain on the horizon that most of what we do is joyful. And most of what we do is in community service with each other. And so I try to remember that when we're having these conversations too. Otherwise, and I don't say that to downplay the trauma that comes from it, but also just to keep it in perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I entered into this work in a serious way when I met Arlene. But there was a lot of trainings in library land, and libraries can be echo chambers. We tend to do what the next library is doing and try it out and see how it fits in our system. And we don't often look outside of ourselves for solutions. And that was really something that bothered me around safety, that we hadn't quite cracked the nut of how do we keep our library safe. We had, I think the closest thing that felt like it resonated for me was some of the early Ryan Dowd trainings. And so that style or type of inviting people in to a training was much different than one-way communication. And so I think that really has been a stylistic approach that we've taken in our library. And the other piece is that we had tend to externalize the violence in the library in the past, or talk about the incidents rather than talk about the impacts on us. And so that was that was another piece that we changed our positioning and our perspective about. So really is what is the impact on us as a team? And I agree that 100% leadership needs to be involved in it. In our PAVE cohorts, I always go to day 1 and I always go to day 5. So that my team knows that we're all in this together, and that's part of our culture. We check in ways that we've learned around with PAVE just at a regular meeting. So we've really tried to make safety and both emotional safety and physical safety in our library a priority in everything we do. The other piece is that I think for many years, libraries were what I call long suffering around this. We have heard, we know people that have gotten killed as part of the library work that they've done. A leader in Sacramento was shot quite a few years ago now. And I mean, I've also been in all types of libraries. I've been in libraries where there was gun violence. I've been in libraries, though, that were mostly children's libraries. So everything in between. But what I will say is it doesn't matter what it is. Everybody has some kind of reaction to any kind of violence in the library. And I think, kind of ranking the egregiousness of violence too is something that we should not be doing in this space. And I think that sometimes when we're talking from an urban library's perspective, because we do see a lot in our urban libraries, Alameda County included, I think it's important to say that all of us here and all of the beautiful people I'm seeing coming in from all different places and across the country, that we all have experienced something in violence in our libraries. And I think that unto itself is something we share, and it should be a solution that we share too. I think this is, the hush-hush ways of old, of hiding incident reports and not talking publicly about things is gone. I think that if there's not a library that has moved on from that way of doing it, catch up, because we've got a lot of good resources to get us through this in a way that we know how to take care of ourselves and each other. And that's what I tell my staff. Take care of yourselves and each other.
Heather, do you mind if I follow up on something that?
Please, Arlene.
Yeah. So 2 things I want to touch upon. One is the transparency that Josh and Deb has also touched upon. What we have found in library land is there's a lot of angst around incidents that may happen that aren't even at a location or at a branch. It's within their system, or it could even be in a system, half the country away. But that angst about that happening really starts to bubble up. And so what we have been able to do in the training is to use those incidents almost as a case study and say, okay, this happened at our Fremont location. If it happened here, how would we handle it? Oh, it really couldn't happen here because we only have 1 floor here. Oh, okay, perfect. So it reduces the angst. And if it could happen at this other location, then let's walk through it. How would we handle it? Where would we go? Who would we call? Who would handle it? And so it immediately runs a dry run. And as I know, coming from a sports background, is that once that muscle memory gets put in there, it's easier when we're actually put up against it, right? We're ready for it. So that transparency can be used as a really, really strong tool. Don't shy away from it. And then the other thing I'm going to touch upon that Deb kind of brought into the conversation is we have just been discussing things and incidents that happen within our library. And if we continue to ask our staff and our employees and our teams to show up as their whole selves, we have to acknowledge that they may be dealing with violent and aggressive behavior outside of their workplace, right? That is going to impact how they move through their day. And we want to make sure that we are strengthening with the skills to deal with that as well. And that's what we've been able to do with the collaborations we've had.
This book should go on here. However, it's a weird exception.
Just remind some folks
Yes.
to mute their mics.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for doing.
That's it. That's all on that, Heather, that I wanted to share.
I appreciate that, Arlene. And just as a follow-up to Deb's reflections, this notion of the trauma that we bring to our work, to our lives, that comes into the workspace is, I think, underestimated. And when it's activated in the presence of a patron in distress or a colleague who has some particular issue, all of this helps to activate the environment. And we need a way, a mechanism to talk about that doesn't further activate it, but is a gateway to some healing. And that starts with an understanding from a leadership's perspective that this isn't just a problem, an isolated problem to fix, and then we move on from it as if nothing had happened. But what is the universal impact to our system, our environment here? And certainly the impact going forward in terms of how we retain, keep people, and attract people to the profession. Because that's the other thing that came up, I think, as a reflection from this summit, which was, what are we doing to advocate on behalf of the profession to invite more people into it when we know that the media has a tendency to publicize and further activate based on these violent events? So that's a good segue, I think, to our next segment, and we've touched on it already, is what are these actionable strategies that we can either locally or across our ecosystem advocate for from a bigger way so that we have more than just policy, which is helpful, but what are some real strategies that we can share and that can be adaptable in any of these geographies or environments, whether we're a one-person branch in a rural area or we're in downtown Chicago and responsible for multiple urban branches. So, Colleen, what are your thoughts about that? What are some actionable strategies to some of these issues?
Quite honestly, I always think having social workers, therapists, or more support staff is a good answer. It's a good start if that's possible within your budget. I know there's some leaders out there who are not quite sure what social workers do within a library. And on the flip side, I've also unfortunately heard library staff say if we have a social worker, then that's going to bring more problems into our system. So I think, educating on the role of a social worker, or if you have a social worker on staff, really understanding what they're dealing with day to day, those people also need to support. Again, just having those clear conversations, that's my strategy, is that communication from the top, leadership really owning it, but also making sure they're collaborating with the rest of the team, the rest of their senior team and staff, to make sure that message is captured. And again, maybe weaving the community's thoughts into it as well, because these incidents that keep on occurring, or it's unfortunately ruining the reputation of the library. And you have, a wonderful staff working so hard on programming and your collection and all that wonderful stuff. And, any sort of, horrible incidents that do leak out to the public, again, all that does is create fear and ruins our reputation. So I'm thinking with the marketing and communications hat on right now.
And that's an important one, because if we aren't thinking about it, someone else is, and making some judgments based on what we're trying to do and not necessarily we're effective in instituting. Deb?
Heather, I can add, just to reflect on what Colleen said too, is there's an aspect of this around documentation and training that I think is what fuels the fear of being transparent, and the marketing and the communication piece. And I think that's something we need to work on in our own organization, is how are the incidents actually documented? And that is a specific skill set for all staff to learn. So I know I would be much more comfortable knowing that everybody had been trained in proper documentation. And then that way it didn't have biases or other things in those words, but it was, just the facts. But we can't expect staff to do incident reports with just the facts if they don't have the emotional support to delineate what is an incident report and what is the actual pain and trauma that comes with something. I think through, the work that we've done, and I do a little shout out to Molly Meisenheimer, who's on this call. This our PAVE work has been done through our training and development wing of the library in HR. So it didn't come from our safety team, although they're highly involved in it. It came from training and development. And I think that really speaks a lot around our strategy for the work that we're doing. And I think the other piece is that keeping calibrated and perspective is amongst, if you have, multiple sites in your system, amongst each other, so that they can compare and contrast, not in a way that's punitive or it is to call one library out from another, but just so they can say, oh, we're experiencing this here. Oh, we did that. Like kind of what Arlene was saying is use incidents from other libraries and have a group think on those. So that's definitely part of what we're doing. The other piece that's real for us, though, is that we can write all the policies in the world. Policies are our tool that we can use and are enforceable in a way, but there's a huge difference between the law and what is library policy. And I think that bridge needs to continue to be built. So another strategy is to speak with local law enforcement in a way that educates them about what libraries do and how libraries handle incidents. And oftentimes we blow their mind with the amount of kindness and goodwill that we show to our members because we know that we are a safety net in our community. And so I think the relationships with the local jurisdictions is really an important part of the strategy too.
Appreciate that, Deb. And it's easy to see how equity it informs a lot of those policies and procedures and plays out in real contribution right across the board within your communities and your stakeholders. Josh, as you're listening to especially documentation and reporting and transparency, thoughts from you on some strategies to address these pressing issues, especially around the sharing of information and not demonizing the documents, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very me answer, but I think of this as largely a process issue. It's very hard to improve things if you handle every incident, everything that happens on an ad hoc case by case basis. There has to be some standardization, some transfer of knowledge from one incident to the next, how you handle them, what's happening. The thing is, though, that means something different for every library because everyone's at a different stage, right? There are some libraries who already have a very well-established system in place for handling incidents, and maybe their weak spot is we could really use some training for everyone, and something like PAVE would be wonderful. There are some libraries who could also use that, but maybe they're still putting each incident down on pen and paper on a standardized form. And there are some very large library systems who are still doing that. And it's very hard to pull any overall lessons, let alone trends from data that's just on a bunch of hard copy forms. So the way we think about it, we've actually created a set of stages that we think of libraries as traveling through. And that way we're able to kind of place each library kind of along this spectrum, which helps us think about, okay, what's the next step in your library's journey? Because that way we aren't trying to push someone from going from a paper form or from a Google Google Docs form or a spreadsheet to, all right, we're going to have a full-on automated process with let's say, standardized messages and reporting and notifications going out. That's a lot of change to happen all at once. And so the way I like to think about it is trying to figure out what's the next step to continually improve your process, right? Maybe your next step, maybe your weak spot is the documentation. Maybe it's on actually doing something with the documentation. Maybe it's on ensuring that people input standardized data into your forms. Maybe it's more training. Maybe it is working better with law enforcement. That can be a very different thing for everyone.
Indeed.
And I would say to try to make this a little more concrete, one common thing we do find as folks move to standardized reporting is it tends to over standardize responses. One thing that is very important is, and this kind of gets to what the rest of you were saying here, is libraries are not law enforcement, and they shouldn't be in many respects. Law enforcement itself should take into account individual circumstances, but it often fails in that regard. Libraries absolutely should. And the risk is if you start turning things into standardized forms, you can turn incident reporting into kind of more of a legal formalism. We've seen some libraries where once you put it into a form, that turns into almost a logical chain of events where, if you've been reported for this, then you get yourself a week ban. And if it's your second time, then you get a month ban. It's less standardization, more accounting for events is all very helpful. So one thing we've found very, very useful with some libraries is having a way for folks to report things that happened that are not incidents per se. The term we like to use is notable occurrences, and that's not our term, that's from one of our clients. But that way people can report things that doesn't necessarily require any action, but it helps folks see behavior over time. Maybe there's just this low level of not actually completely violating rules, or not to the point where people want to report it, right? One thing we found is, let's say, being disruptive in a library. If folks at the staff level feel that reporting something as disruptive will lead to consequences, almost all or in all situations, they're less likely to report that. And so you're not actually getting good data into the system. If you have a notable occurrences form that doesn't require any action, then you might get a better sense of, actually there's this low level of lightly disruptive behavior in this area of the library. Then you can make some changes and help prevent that from becoming worse without having to assign consequences to it, without having to necessarily report that to law enforcement or things like that. So that's trying to give a concrete example of how this can be used effectively.
That's appreciated. Certainly wise counsel, breaking things down into bite-sized pieces so it doesn't seem so overwhelming to implement. We could talk for a lot longer about some of these key issues, but we want to invite those who are attending now to submit their questions. And so we'll open it up now. And as we do that, you're either typing the question into the chat or old-fashioned raising your hand on the screen. Happy to invite your questions now. And in your closing remarks, I'll ask our panelists to think about what's one big idea for better collaboration across the ecosystem. Participation here today and your generous contributions is one step. What are other things that you can think of that would really amplify? And while you're thinking about that, Julia has a question. Welcome, Julia.
Hi. I find this really interesting. I have worked in Canada. I've worked also in the US, but my work in the US was mainly in prison libraries. So, this is really interesting about the legal involvement of these organizations and standardization. questions, etc. But what I really want to know, I'm not from the public library sector, so how does an organization, for instance, a county library like Alameda, how do you initially engage with PAV?
It's a
Thanks, Julia.
it's a great story, Julie. I'm happy to answer that. Uh, one Saturday, somebody told me that he was going to do a training for the Oakland Park Stewards groups. And what the stewards are pairs of uh, people who close the park at night. And basically, they are responsible for getting people out of an open outdoor space. And the parallels between that and library work was really interesting. And so I started thinking about it and talking about it with some of my division directors. And they said there's probably transferable skills between what the park stewards do and what the library does. And when we even have, smaller cities can tend to have libraries and parks and rec as one department. So we wanted to see if there was an outside learning. It was just the curiosity to know. And we had learned about some work that PAVE had done with macro, which is the intermediary step between calling the police and not doing anything. It's that Oakland has this great kind of middle partner to help with a lot of mental illness, substance abuse things. And so we were feeling our parallel roles, and we wanted to see if there was transferable skills. And so spent a Saturday morning watching the park stewards do this, and just could not stop talking about how valuable the information transference into libraries would be. And PAVE was like, libraries, what are you guys doing? This is wild. It's some very different views of libraries. And so really, we were the first public library to work with them. And their curriculum group was incredibly responsive to and curious. I think I wrote this down. I think Arlene said I was excited to learn what I didn't know. That's what her comment was about the summit. And I think that's been their approach with us the whole time. We had to go out for an RFP for this work too, and the types of responses that we got were nowhere near the thoughtful responses that we got through PAVE. They were either hyper militarized and very policing safety, or more community-based organization, social work and services, which is we need that too. But this was kind of this really specific skill set that we wanted to have every single one of our staff trained on. And we've trained, we're in our last year of training cohorts. And so we have everyone in our system, pages up through, the executive team, all in these trainings, cross classification, cross location. And so the learning and the connectivity has happened because of that. But we it was a fluke. Let's go try this out and see what this is all about. And it just grew into this wonderful relationship of understanding each other and knowing that we needed to marry these skills. And I call it my gift to library land, is because I think that, we did a lot of attempting trainings that were active shooter trainings or those kinds of things, and it never quite hit or resonated because there wasn't a personal learning that was going on at the same time. And since this is personal trauma that happens in our libraries, a personal learning needed to happen. And so it's kind of how it's been an evolution over the last 4 years.
That's really interesting. Thank you very much. It's a real serendipity there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just looking in the chat, we have a question from Nina Lindsay. How can we support staff to write effective and efficient reports? I struggle with not wanting to ask too much of staff in the wake of an incident, but we need pertinent information in a timely manner. As a result, we get a lot of stream of consciousness, which is workable, but not always best for long-term reporting. Curious if anyone has some great templates. And then there was an offering from Tressis and Tia from the Worcester Public Library, a form that they use. But any quick responses on that? Any reporting forms or templates that you find useful
Hey, Nina.
besides Josh's?
How you doing, Nina? You know what? We borrowed some from San Francisco too. They have uh, a great training that they gave. And I would say this is one of the areas that we're still working on too. So I love to be in conversation with you all around that because those documents are legal documents. We have used them in workplace violence restraining order courts. We have used them we get, California Public Records requests all the time. And I know Nina does too. And so those are all things that can be called into public spaces. And not having proper documentation is really what fuels that lack of transparency that we talked about in the beginning of this. It's something that we absolutely struggle with. I think, the fear of what's in those reports and that getting out and if there's, opinion or bias or, you know, other things that show up in those reports, that's where that fear of and protectionism comes. And that is actually what is a self-fueling cycle for us. So we're working on that too, but we did take some stuff from San Francisco Public.
Thanks, Deb. That's all part of the ecosystem.
Yes.
R&D, robbing and duplicating.
I agree entirely. I mean, Worcester's form looks great. Again, we recommend a mix of structured fields, so things like checkboxes, radio boxes, drop downs, and text entry fields that are, as much as possible, fairly limited in scope so that you can not only get the information you need, but it doesn't encourage sort of a full kind of brain dump, which can not only give you a lot of information that you may not want to have in your system, but also makes it hard to pull useful information out of there. The more you can structure the response, the better. A couple of things I've noted is in Worcester's form, for instance, the use of kind of complexion, at least including unknown as the gender of folks involved. Right, you don't necessarily want people to have to make judgment calls as to those things in all cases. And so giving folks some room to provide a textual response there rather than having a very locked down, let's say, set of radio boxes or a drop down is often useful. It involves a lot of thought on the front end of what information do you want? How will it really be useful? How will you use it? And what don't you want in your system? So we have a lot of we pull a lot from our clients. Everyone, one of the things I love about the library space is everyone is willing to share best practices. So we have a lot of templates that we've not only provided ourselves, but we've pulled from clients, and that we can always work with folks on that. So exactly.
Thank you, Nina. You've been very patient. Is that your?
No, this is very helpful. This is very helpful, and I thought it's really that description of the incident free text field that we're focused on right now. And I think Tressa put a really helpful comment just about coaching staff to write in the third person and use initials. And that's the kind of direction I'm looking to give staff so that they can, in the wake of an incident, explain what happened, but in a way that's going to be that we're comfortable living in the system forever. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We had one.
Heather, do you mind if I just add on to that?
Yes.
I would encourage folks as they are customizing this reporting software or adding to how people are reporting, that we add at the end of that, how is the person who's experienced this incident, how are they feeling? Where are they at? We use what's called the spectrum of awareness Are we feeling green? Are we feeling yellow? Are we feeling red or anywhere in between there? But just a quick acknowledgement so you know if that person, if that staff member has 5 of those events where they felt red in a 3-month period, they may need a break from public facing interactions, right? So that acknowledgement at the end on how are you, as Deb said, we want to have discussions and trainings that benefit the person. I think that needs to be added into this incident reporting protocol.
Thank you, Arlene. We had one final question in the chat. And in fairness, it's addresses, potential discriminatory biases that would lead to different responses for patrons who violate conduct policy. Would it be okay for us to circulate this to the panelists so they can give a more fulsome, thoughtful response to it? Because we're coming up to the hour and I want to be respectful of people's time. So if you're okay with that, please indicate in the chat your email address where our panelists may be able to follow up and provide some feedback on that. And as we wrap up, the hour has gone by very quickly. It's always a good sign when there's a dynamic group of panelists, some stimulating conversation around important topics, ranging from, all of us being more collaborative, pulling our heads out of the sand, as was said, and incorporating a lot more transparency and successful practices in the work that we do. Having leaders extend the responsibilities for this, so it can't really fall on one role in terms of the security person, but across our entire cultures, and sharing that responsibility with an attended support of training and development and professional development has been mentioned. Just rapidly from each of our panelists as we close today, one idea or thought to leave with us that will be inspiring as we move to do our work in libraries in 2026. Who would like to start?
I would say, don't stay helpless, stay hopeful.
Thank you, Deb. Josh or Colleen or Arlene?
I'd say start the conversation, jump in, go to leadership, say, I think this is important and we need to scale up and start doing some additional work.
Thanks, Colleen. Josh?
You don't need to do everything at once.
Yeah, pace yourself. Yeah.
Take a step in the right direction, then you can take another. You don't need to go all or nothing.
Indeed. Arlene?
Yeah, I would encourage people to do something different, right? I mean, we've been doing kind of the same things and taking the same approaches and having the same results. So it's time to start looking at different options on how we keep our workplaces safe. And yes, you have great connections and great openness within library land, but speak to a nurses association, how they're dealing with their things. Speak to a restaurant association on how they're dealing with violent interactions in their spaces. I think the more we share information across all sectors, the better we're going to be.
Indeed. And related to that, as we continue the conversations on these important topics, here's where PAVE and their stakeholders are being involved in the community. Those of us who are in Canada and maybe in the Greater Toronto area towards the end of the month can join us for our half-day workshop on library safety solutions at the Ontario Library Conference Super Conference in Toronto, and we'll have a booth there as well too. There will be a regional summit in California, Castro Valley, again, in aid of sharing ideas and building collaborations. We'll have a quarterly human safety skills webinar. I'm focused on de-escalation. And as we move into the spring, we're presenting and participating at the PLA conference in Minneapolis, and in June, the ALA conference in Chicago. So on behalf of PAVE Prevention and all of our fantastic panelists today, thank you so much for your participation. This is being recorded, and I urge you to share the recording when it's available to your colleagues who couldn't join us today. So again, thank you very much, and we appreciate your participation.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Arlene, everyone at PAVE. This
Thank
was
you,
lovely.
Dave. Good to see
Thank you,
you.
Josh.
Sarah.
Thank you.